All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this virtual live. We have today on our live Jonathan McCullum. We have Mohammed from CARE, Michelle from Communities United Against Police Brutality, and Nakima Levy Armstrong from Racial Justice Network. We're going to break down a little bit of the trial, some of the reactions that we have so far, and then we also want to talk about our bills and also talk about actions that we need everybody to take at this moment. So, well, without further ado, I guess we'll start us off. Nakima, if you want to just maybe, you talked about decompressing a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about some of the highlights or some of the points that kind of came into your mind so far in the trial?
Sure. First, I just want to express appreciation for all of you guys, because no matter what is going on in the city, you are consistent and steadfast about pushing for these legislative changes. And you have provided this platform for people to know and understand what's going on so that they can get behind these bills. So I'm proud and honored to join you all in this fight for justice and on this live feed. Today, I watched the trial, and I was really struck by the testimony of Donald Williams, who started to testify yesterday. And he was the young African-American man, early 30s, who has a background in MMA, mixed martial art, and security as well. And he was one of the most vocal bystanders during the process of George Floyd being killed by the Minneapolis Police Department. He tried to confront Derek Chauvin and Officer Tao about what they were doing, and he even talked about Derek Chauvin using a blood choke to try to essentially cut off the air supply of George Floyd. And he held his own, I believe, for both days of the testimony. It was really powerful. And then today we heard from Darnella Frazier, who, in my opinion, is a hero. At 17 years old, she witnessed one of the most horrific scenes in the history of our country, live and in color, not something that she read in a history book, but she was there as history was unfolding in front of her. And as she testified, she was just walking into Cup Foods with her little cousin, and she could have just kept on going about her business, but instead she made sure that her little cousin got into the store safely. And then she turned back around and started videotaping what she had seen, what she was witnessing with Derek Chauvin and the other officers killing George Floyd. So for this young woman at 17 to do what she did is remarkable. There was so much emotion in her voice as she testified. She just turned 18 a week ago. So think about what we were all doing when we turned 18. It certainly was not having to testify at a murder trial in a situation that egregious. But that's what she's out there doing, just using her voice, standing up and speaking her truth about what she observed. Also, her little cousin testified as well. And then one of the firefighters slash EMTs testified as well. And I want to bring Jonathan in at this point to help dissect some of the testimony that you heard from the firefighter who was present, who was trying to intervene, and who was essentially prevented from intervening by the officers in question.
Yep. First of all, I think that the testimony from the witnesses is amazing. I think that it paints a picture of what we all already know that happened. With the firefighters' testimony, I think that oftentimes, certain things get lost amongst everything that happened, and her being one of the most medically qualified person on the scene and being dismissed, I think is a failure of that system. When cops are off duty and they approach a scene, they're to be respected, just as if they had on their uniform. Here it was, she showed up, identified herself to the officers, and said, I'm a Minneapolis firefighter, and they could have verified that very easily. We all have badge numbers too. And in case some of the people don't know, I am a retired Minneapolis firefighter. I was injured in the line of duty, saving a young man's life. And as a result of my injuries, I was no longer able to serve. So I am retired from the fire service. So her testimony and her being on scene and being the most medically qualified individual on scene is disturbing. When she makes an opinion that check his pulse, get off of him, and they still choose not to listen to her, and that's a problem that I hope they dig into tomorrow when they continue to examine her testimony.
Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit about some of your reaction to the at least the trial so far?
Absolutely. I think Nekima has it exactly right. It was pretty clear from the opening statements yesterday that the defense rather, was going to take two tactics. One is that they were going to attempt to blame George Floyd for his own, death, even though George Floyd did not put his knee on his own neck. They were going to attempt to, make him responsible for his death. And, interestingly, I'm a retired nurse, and so I can talk a little bit about some of this. George Floyd had coronary artery disease, appeared to be a fairly mild case of it. And like many other people in the community, he had high blood pressure, which is a really common chronic ailment for a lot of people. And he may have, at age 60 or 70 or whatever, he may have eventually died from those particular ailments. But the reality is that he wasn't going to die that day. He wasn't, it was highly unlikely, highly improbable that the level of coronary artery disease he had would have made him die that particular day. And so, like I said, the defense is going to try to somehow kind of dirty him up and make him responsible for his own death, as if, Derek Chauvin's knee sort of like wasn't even in the picture. And then the other thing they were going to do, then, like I said, there's a couple more strategies. One of them is that they were going to blame the crowd. But you can see that Derek Chauvin was utterly unperturbed by the crowd. He wasn't concerned at all. He had his buddy Tutau pushing back against the crowd and, keeping the crowd back. And even when the crowd, was attempting to save George Floyd's life, Tutau played the role of keeping them back. And that's why he is equally culpable. But also the tactic, the strategy that we're going to start hearing about probably pretty soon. It hasn't come out quite yet, but it's going to be, and I think we'll see this during the defense portion of the trial, is a lot of this, like, this is how he was trained type of stuff. This is how he was trained. And so they're going to attempt to make it the city's fault. And to a certain degree, they're not wrong about that. But the reality is that you still know you're not supposed to use force, because even if you're trained in a particular technique, it doesn't mean that you get to use it on everybody. And I love Nekima to weigh in on this part too. You don't get to just use force because you know how to use it from a particular technique. Your force has to be justified. And at no point was any level of force justified, because George Floyd had not committed a crime. They had illegally seized him because he hadn't committed a crime. And the fact that they used any level of force on him at all is wrong. And particularly using potentially lethal force, or in this case, what actually turned out to be lethal force, was utterly uncalled for. Mr. Floyd was under their direct control. He had been handcuffed. He was not fighting them or anything like that. So no level of force was actually justified on him at all. And recognize that things like handcuffing people, putting people in squad cars, all of those are uses of force. But and to me, they were all unjustified. But certainly the level of force of, putting your knee on his neck was in no way justified. And so I love, like I said, Nekima to weigh in on that piece.
I agree from the start. I'm sorry, I have an echo somehow. Okay, let me mute until I figure out why I have an echo.
We're not hearing it from you, Nakima. So
Okay, I just turned my phone off, so hopefully that'll help. So just piggybacking off of what you said, Michelle, I go all the way back to Cup Foods and the fact that they had no business calling 911 over an alleged counterfeit $20 bill. You would think that stores have a more humane and holistic way of dealing with things like that. They could have said, hey, you can no longer come into the store again, or given him a warning or an opportunity to pay it back. And it was over a pack of cigarettes, right? Which reminds me of what happened to Eric Garner. It reminds me of what happened to Mike Brown in terms of the demonization of Black men surrounding selling cigarettes, buying cigarettes, taking cigarettes, and how that has led to death sentences in those three cases. So I believe that Cup Foods was irresponsible in calling 911. I believe that it was irresponsible of the Minneapolis Police Department to show up when we actually do have serious crime in the city that could have been addressed, and for the park police to show up, which we have for years advocated for an end to the park police because of the criminalization of Black people, and how all of that led to them treating George Floyd like he was a piece of property. From the very beginning, when the first officer approached his vehicle, pulling out a weapon in that moment without even understanding or assessing the scene and treating this Black man as if he was a threat, things just escalated from there. And one of the things that is so disturbing about that video is just seeing the coldness on the face of Derek Chauvin as he is literally choking the life out of George Floyd by pressing his knee into his neck. He does not care about the crowd. He doesn't care that they're yelling. He doesn't care that there's an EMT on the scene. He doesn't care that there are children on the scene. He made the decision that he was going to take a life, and that's what he did. And now he's trying to blame everyone but himself for his own actions. So shame on Derek Chauvin. Shame on those other three officers who aided and abetted. Shame on the Minneapolis Police Department for the culture that they have created that allows police officers to kill with impunity. Shame on the city of Minneapolis for settling tens of millions of dollars in excessive force lawsuits over the years and failing to overhaul that department. And shame on Mayor Jacob Fry for being ill-equipped to help overhaul our system of policing in the city of Minneapolis. So there is blame to be had all around. But right now, what I'm aiming for is a second-degree murder and manslaughter conviction for Derek Chauvin. That's it. End of story.
thank you for saying that. And if I can add in too, what people don't realize, and I think this is very important, is that $20 bills are the most counterfeited bills in the country. The Federal Reserve tries to pull those bills back, but they can't keep up. So there's just millions of them out there in circulation. George Floyd worked at, well, actually both of them did, but they worked at a restaurant. He worked at a bar. He could have gotten that as a tip. He could have gotten it from a bank account. What normally happens when there's a counterfeit $20 bill? And by the way, we don't even know that for sure this was a counterfeit bill. But if it was, the normal process is that if the police come at all, they seize the bill, they give the person a receipt for that bill, they ask the person where they think they may have gotten it from, and then they, turn it over to the Federal Reserve for an investigation. This is the normal process. There's no reason that they should come out to the car and put guns in this man's face or anything, because on top of it all, the possession and the payment with using a counterfeit $20 bill is not even a crime in Minnesota. It's not even a crime. You in Minnesota have to, first of all, have intent to use a counterfeit bill, and it has to be $1,000 or more to be in a crime. And so one of the things that we have in our laws in Minnesota is that if something's not a crime, like if something is a petty misdemeanor, in other words, an infraction, not a crime is something you can go to prison for, okay? And if something's just an infraction, something you can't go to prison for, like a traffic ticket or some kind of infraction like that, the police are supposed to give you a citation and let you go. Now, for, again, a counterfeit 20, they don't even only cite people for that. But at most, they should have given a citation and let him go. There was no reason to be bringing guns in his face or anything. And of course, any person would be frightened to have guns put in their face, especially an African-American man who had had bad experiences with the police previously, of course. So there, right from the gate, the use of force was illegitimate. And by the way, again, putting a gun in somebody's face is a use of force as well. And until recently, Minneapolis police did not even have to report that use of force from, on their police reports, which is ridiculous. Finally, that got changed recently. But, this is the source of this stuff. And they want to act like what happened in those 9 minutes and 43 seconds is divorced from every other part of this whole incident. And that's the other piece, is that by acting like that 9 minutes and 43 seconds is the only part that counts, what that does is it makes the other officers less culpable. And that's unacceptable as well. Those guys all participated. In fact, it was their actions that launched this whole thing in the first place and enabled there to be a situation where Derek Chauvin could put his knee on George Floyd's neck.
I wanted to, and I wanted to add to that, thanks, Michelle. And one of the things that struck a chord with me so far was actually the first day, because many of us have not seen the video over and over and over, and it's just been traumatizing for all of us. And this time we're not seeing that one Facebook video or a body cam, we're seeing it from all the different angles. And it was remarkable to see the prosecutors, so far the folks that have testified, all of them, without knowing what's happening, all of them felt clearly something was wrong. And in fact, going back to the 911 operator talking about, I knew something was wrong and I had to speak to my supervisor about it. And so, it's unfortunate that this type of lynching and brutality even has anyone doubting the fact that 4 officers would actually literally physically hold somebody while they're choking him to death. And think about it, if you're a bystander, and many of us have been bystanders for a lot of police incidents, you see these bystanders literally physically shaking because they really knew what was happening, as if that these officers did not feel the same way as these bystanders were looking. You could see them emotionally moving, rocking back and forth, sharing emotion as a way to jolt these officers to act. And they stayed away in ways just to allow for them to listen to them. And so, it's traumatizing for all of us. I know it's painful for all the families who lost loved ones who are seeing this again, and for George Floyd's family and others. And it's a painful process, but I think it's another opportunity for all of us to realize that, in 2021, we are still talking about one of the worst form of police brutality, and talking about a jury and a system that is questioning what we all saw, what we all heard and seen. And so as we learn more of these testifiers, I know there are 400 witnesses, at least witness names that were added. There's definitely a lot more people that saw, but I think the rest of us, all of us who saw that Facebook video, we're all witnesses too. And I think that's something we all have to recognize. And when we're demanding for justice, we are demanding both inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom. But most importantly, right now, I cannot imagine anyone in that jury box who have watched just enough evidence so far to come to any conclusion other than guilty on all charges.
And if I could chime in also, I think one thing that really kind of captured my mind and kind of like really shook me down to my bones is for me, getting the different vantage points really showed the nature of the brutality in the modern day lynching that we all witnessed, especially with the details, knowing that Mr. Floyd was, unconscious, or he was not able to breathe after the 4-minute mark, and yet he continued to press his knee, on George Floyd's neck, which to me was it was numbing in a sense to even hear that, and then also to learn this, the multiple accounts of, the paramedics showing up and they're trying to get a pulse, on George Floyd while Derek Chauvin's knee is still, on George Floyd's neck, and then having to get up only after he was told, okay, that's enough. you know, and this whole time he still had his knee on his neck. So for me, that was really, it kind of really brought back or again, you know, showcased the.
You're kind of going out at the end, Muhammad. Muhammad, can you say the last part again?
Yeah, and for me, sorry about that, everybody. But yeah, for me at the end, it just really showcased the brutality and kind of maybe how desensitized we all became throughout the summer, and then now being reacquainted with the details, it was just really, really, you know, traumatizing. And I can only imagine how traumatizing it is for anybody that lost a loved one.
Absolutely. And we think about George Floyd's daughter. I'm holding my daughter, who is almost 4 years old. She's only a few years younger than George Floyd's youngest child, who had to witness, just like everyone else, the manner in which her dad was killed, and to try to find the strength and resolve to say, Daddy changed the world. You know, think about that. Just the impact on our children having to be traumatized through this process over and over and over again. And how in many of our school systems, too many teachers are even afraid to broach the subject of a situation like this, even though Black children do not have the opportunity to be shielded from these kinds of situations because of the society that we live in.
Yeah, and it's just completely unfortunate. It just feels like, you know, we've had many of police brutality cases that are to a lot of the people in the public questions. But think about this trial. This is, you know, this is the worst form of killing that we've ever seen, and again, still there is some form of defense. I mean, think about it. Like, you know, they're already grasping for, you know, to try to pull on some of these you know, points of, you know, to discredit witnesses as you know, as folks who are angry Black men, or, you know, to try to discredit witnesses based on what they have seen or what they have not seen. And again, it's like, you know, I don't care what the witness saw. There's enough footage and evidence. Why did it take 4 officers to hold and literally squeeze every little ounce of breath out of the chest of George Floyd, and then come back to us and tell us that they were doing their job and the audience may have distracted them? The audience was giving them instructions to give this man life and a breath, and they did not. And if anyone was trained to save people's life, it should have been the police officers and the the person from the fire department, as well as the paramedics. It's just I think for many of us, we heard the pain and we internalized that video, and now the trial is just exposing how brutal this entire thing was, and how damaging it is for all of us, and how it will be exceptionally injustice if we don't get anything less than all 3 counts, guilty on all charges. And I think that jury has no option but to return all guilty verdict. And so I don't know what the defense is going to put on, but you cannot say that you did not see a human being killed in that manner.
Exactly. But we also have to remember, this is Minnesota. Minnesota is 84% white. Many of our communities are very heavily
Nakima,
segregated.
your audio is a little.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Many of our communities are very segregated, even though the Twin Cities is more diverse than much of the rest of the state. And so our experience as Black people and other people of color is vastly different from what white people experience, unfortunately. And so it is still possible that even with the evidence that we've seen, that Derek Chauvin could be acquitted. And so we have to brace ourselves for that possibility. And it is because of the long history of corruption within police departments, the fact that police have been able to kill with impunity, and the fact that the system has rubber stamped police misconduct and abuse for so many years. Beyond that, we've never had a white officer charged with killing a black person in the history of the state of Minnesota, as far as we can tell. So this is a first in many respects. And imagine, after what we saw with that video, if Derek Chauvin is not convicted, it's going to be even more dangerous for black people and other people of color in the state of Minnesota when we encounter police. They will know that they can use deadly force without any consequences based on the facts of this particular case and Derek Chauvin possibly getting away with murder.
Absolutely. You made a really important point about, the kind of the long legacy of police treatment of people of color in the Twin Cities. I think that many people don't necessarily know Derek Chauvin's history, and it's really important to talk about that. Prior to him killing George Floyd, he had been involved in 5 other deadly force incidents. This is not, this is crazy. He had 26 complaints against him between Internal Affairs and the Office of Police Conduct Review, civilian review. And he had been involved in 5 prior deadly force incidents. 4 people died in those prior incidents, and 1 person managed to survive. But this, and the other thing to know about that is every single person in those incidents was a person of color. Every single one. So, his history was known. And what did Minneapolis do about that? They didn't discipline him. They didn't address his conduct in any way, except to promote him and make him a trainer. And, so if we want to say, well, gosh, he's an outlier, or he's, rotten apple, or whatever they like to call these things, there's no such thing as that. This is about a bad system because it validates that conduct and allows it to continue, and even encourages it by, again, making him a trainer to train other officers to conduct that same conduct. And interestingly, before he put his knee on George Floyd's neck, there were 6 other people that he put his knee on their necks. And one of them is actually going to testify in the trial. I'm waiting for that to come up. But this guy had a whole history of that. And not only did he have that history, but not 2 weeks before he killed George Floyd, he and the 2 trainee officers that he was working with had an almost identical incident happen to an African-American man at an apartment complex, not even 2 weeks before. And it was involving those same 3 of those same 4 officers. So this is, insane, this guy. He, they knew what he was about. So this is a real indictment of the whole system, not just this one killer cop or his 3 accomplices. The whole system needs to be indicted and recognized for bad.
Right. I also think that they need to look at. I mean, Derek Chauvin is poison, and everything that he touched is poison. How many other officers are out there that got some of his teachings are on how to treat community members, or how to brutalize community members? And no one's heard anything about the city of Minneapolis reviewing everybody who he had contact with and taught to figure out what behavior they took away from Derek Chauvin. And I think that it's important that gets looked into as well.
That's one of the things that maybe we should add to our list of recommendations, some kind of reparations commission that's established in the city of Minneapolis for folks who encounter Derek Chauvin and other killer cops on the force. Because the city of Minneapolis has not made amends. They think that one payment of a $27 million lawsuit is going to resolve the entire situation and make them look progressive, but it doesn't. That was the bare minimum of what they owed that family, but it's also the bare minimum of what they could do to address the issues within their system of policing.
Absolutely. One of the things that came up, and this might be a good kind of a segue to go into talking about the bills that we're working on and trying to get, passed in the legislature, because while we are the epicenter of protest and demands for police accountability in the country and really the world, we're sitting here and cannot get our bills heard at the legislature meaningfully. We can't get our city to adopt any type of appropriate recommendations to alleviate this situation. And just last week, we had to have yet another press conference to talk about police victimizing young African-American teens, young men. And, so here we are back at this kind of same stuff again, right? And in 10 months since more than 10 months since George Floyd's been killed, we're not seeing any progress at all. And so part of what I talked about when we were testifying, one of our bills would require law enforcement agencies to release unredacted body camera footage to the victims of people killed by police within 48 hours. And I think this is a really important bill for truth and honesty to the families, because one of the things I pointed out is if there had not been bystander footage, then George Floyd's family probably would not know what had happened to him to this day. I think that's very important, because law enforcement, they can hang on to this stuff for a year, 2 years. I've seen it. So we know that probably, like I said, they were over here talking about it as a medical emergency, the city and the police, and we would have ended up, literally, no one would have known what really happened to this man if there had not been bystander footage.
Right. I'll say that the 48-hour bill that the opposition that we received in the House of Representatives when we testified on that bill was very disgusting. The way that the members, some of the members approached it, their backgrounds that they had in their photos, without even hearing the bill or reading the bill or listening to the testimony, they had already taken a position and had already taken a side. And when you have an elected person that don't even want to hear what the people have to say, and have already made their decision, it's time for them to go. And if they think that we're not going to get involved in these elections, or that we're just going to shut up and somehow go into a hole somewhere, they're badly mistaken, and wait until they run for office. We got some things that we're going to be planning to do.
I want to chime in on that. So Michelle and Jonathan testified on those bills last week, and I'm trying to pull up the picture, but Star Tribune, our local paper, instead of focusing on what the bills were about, instead of focusing and educating people about what community groups are trying to do to hold police accountable, they actually literally mocked the conversation and focused on what Jonathan was mentioning, which was some of the legislators using their Zoom background, putting out what is it? Here's the title of the. I'll hope just put it here for a second, but hopefully I can pull it out. But it says Minnesota police reform debate plays out in legislators' Zoom background. This is the type of journalism that we have to deal with here in the Twin Cities. Disrespectful, does not take police accountability seriously, and continues to project unjournalistic ethics in these moments right now, playing with people's lives and trivializing it. If it was any other issue, they would be talking about the nuances, and they would be talking about the important aspects of what's going on. But instead, they're mocking important discussions that are happening on the House and focusing on some silly screenshots, background screens. And this is the reality that we have to deal with. And so that's why, I encourage all of you right now who are watching, we need three things for you to do. Number one, we need you to let your elected officials know that you are watching them. They knocked on your door this past summer, or electronically knocked or sent you a bunch of mail to get your vote. But right now we're asking them to pass legislation, and they are nowhere to be found. In fact, this week they're all on vacation, while we are all traumatized and re-traumatized by the fact that this trial is going on and all the aspects that are around it. The state of Minnesota has yet to pass any meaningful legislation while cities like New York are passing qualified immunity, and other states like Colorado and others who did not kill George Floyd, who the entire world is not watching right now, but our state legislators are failing to do anything about it. And the reason why is because they think you don't care. And that's why you need to organize and mobilize. Don't do it by yourself. You have a faith group that you're a part of, a church group you're a part of, a synagogue or a mosque. You're part of some group. Organize them, call them to task, and say, if you are real about what you stand for, this is a moment that our organization needs to stand with the families, need to stand and actually fix police accountability. Yes, I said this yesterday. We're tired of the sympathies. Don't go on Facebook and tell us how you're sympathetic about the trial. Give us solutions. Let us fight for solutions. We can't keep having these conversations. We have to fix this problem. It's interesting, when it came to the pandemic, nobody was asking for sympathies about COVID. Everybody wanted to know where the vaccine were. This is the way we have to think about these issues. We have to say we want solution-driven process. We want solutions. We want to hold police accountable. And right now, these 8 bills are common sense bills, but they're still not having the type of respect and welcome in the House of Legislators, in the House of Representatives, and also in our local media. So we really need to get stronger now and get organized. And that's what we're asking every single one of you. Force your group that you're part of to stand up for justice right now. We need them to put their organization and sacrifice some time, call their legislators, be part of this coalition that we're building, and we need to make these bills happen. This state of Minnesota can be a state that leads on justice, but right now I'm telling you, we are sleeping. We are sleeping, and we are losing an opportunity where the entire world is watching us, but also ourselves. And if we fail, we're not going to fail no one other than ourselves. Because every murder that happens in this state, every single one of us who lives in this state is responsible. And if you think somehow you can get away with it, you can't. Because I personally believe there's a higher power that we're going to reckon to, whether you think or not, who's going to ask you about what you did about saving people's lives. And I think that's really what we all have to focus on.
Absolutely. Right. And to Jaylani's point, where you talked about, legislators don't think we care. I think the honest truth is that too many Minnesotans really don't care about what is going on within this system. How many times have we issued calls to action, and we've seen a fraction of people actually show up at our rallies outside of the state capitol, show up at the governor's house, pick up the phone and make a call or send an email? Few and far between. And many of these folks consider themselves progressive, who are not getting involved in this fight. So where are our allies? Where are all these organizations who have thousands of members on their rolls when it comes to standing up against police brutality and challenging what's happening at the legislature? They might have a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard, but where are they when we need them out on the front line standing with us? So if these groups are saying that they're allies, they need to show and prove or get out of the way. We don't have time. It's just too many lives at stake. Our future as a state is at stake. We need people to show up and get involved and take this seriously.
Yeah. We have deadlines that we have to meet in order to get our legislative initiatives through. And this week, last week, this week, and next week are some of our biggest deadlines that we have coming. I think that the Senate is trying to hide behind this trial. I think they're trying to hide behind COVID restrictions, hoping that people ain't paying attention and they can just thwart their responsibility. And the fact of the matter is that the Senate is not even giving us a hearing. They could easily call a hearing and kill our bills in the hearing if they chose to, but that just goes to show everybody what they think of us, that our issues don't matter, our bills don't matter, our lives don't matter. And if you look at some of the common threads through all this, all the people that are harmed by law enforcement and are in state-sanctioned violence, there's only one thing that they have in common, and that's the color of their skin. And so you have to, at some point in time, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I mean, you have to call it what it is. And this is what's happening in the Minnesota Senate now, and it's a disgrace.
Absolutely.
And even to look at the Senate levels as well, if I could quickly chime in, that they have certain things that they are pushing forward, right? That I think it's called like a police innovation bill. But this being the state where George Floyd was murdered and lynched at, we don't have a single police accountability bill that is coming out of the Senate that was put together, on their end, especially when it comes to omnibus together. And this to go back and ask questions like, what are our senators and our legislators actually doing when it comes to the things that actually matter right now, like police accountability bills, right? And for us, as we continue to have these conversations, it's really important for us to email our legislators, especially those in committee chairs, to make sure that our bills are getting hearings through the House and also through the Senate as well. So we need to send out, emails to individuals just like, Warren Limmer, to make sure that we give these bills a hearing, because there is, an attempt to, make our bills essentially drown or, run the timeout on our bills, because we do have a deadline of April 9th where we have to have all these bills go through. But if they close out the omnibus bill and they don't give any of our bills a hearing, then, all efforts are lost. So we really need everybody to kind of put their boots on the ground and, pick up the phone, get your Twitter fingers ready, send out emails and email individuals like Rebecca Finn and ask her to give our 8 bills, 6 of our bills a hearing. Email individuals like Warren Limmer to make sure that we can get some of these bills, like ending qualified immunity, like, ending, police-only response to a mental health crisis calls, and so many other bills that we have going on to make sure that they get a hearing, so that way they get their fair shot of actually being heard and passed through the House and passed through the Senate. And we can't do this alone. We need all of you all to go ahead and, text the number that you see below. Text the number 8 to 612-200-2550. There's already a pre-filled message. It will pre-select all of your legislators for you already. It takes you less than a minute and a half. So go ahead and text that number and get that link and show your support. And I think Jelani's putting the website right here on there as well. If you scroll all the way down, you'll have a placeholder where you can punch in your first name and your last name and your address. And it does list the bills right above there. But once you complete this little short form, it will send a pre-filled letter with all of the links to the bills and all the bill language to specifically your legislators, as well as some individuals from the governor's office as well. As soon as you hit next, it will show you the pre-filled message. If you want to modify it or add something else in there as well, you are able to. And the next page just confirms that you want to send out the message. So this is already pre-filled for you. All you have to do is text the number 8 to the phone number below, and you will get this link, and you just fill out your information. And it's as if you're going to send out 8 to 10 emails by just hitting the next button and hitting submit. So it's as easy as it gets. All you have to do is just text that phone number below.
Exactly. Back before COVID, we used to be able to organize, days on the Hill and this kind of stuff. We used to bring people out, right? And we could bring a whole lot of people to the legislature. We could go and do a sit-in at Warren Limmer's office or whatever it would take to try to get these legislators to do stuff. But we're in this time of COVID, and so we can't do that. But what we need instead is we need to get people to virtually do that, right? And we're trying our best to make it easy for you to do that. It takes a couple people on here noted that it's super easy, and I thank you for that, because it is. This is a great way to have big impact. And, the 9 bills we've put forward, one is frankly dead in the water, so we're not going to talk about that one too much. But the other 8 have some shot of being passed, some more than others, but only if we actually take action. Because of the way that the legislature operates, we've got to have things heard on both chambers, the House and the Senate. We've had good luck with most of our bills in the House side, or at least reasonable luck. And now we need to have things happen on the Senate side. And the Senate is run by Republicans, has a lot of law enforcement, actual legislators, and a lot of people that are very, I would say, almost subservient to law enforcement. I don't know if that's a proper thing to say, but I'll call it that. And
maybe beholden.
That's a better way to say it. Thank you. Way better. Thanks, Nikema. You're always the voice of reason, but
not always, but I try when I can, because I don't know what would have happened if I had been a bystander. I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
They're trying to, in that video as we talked about, it is so hard for us to restrain ourselves given all that we're up against, even when, folks are going to the legislature, coming with the statistics, coming with the information, our ideas are still being rejected by the powers that be. And that gets so frustrating. It's like they're inviting another wave of folks rising up in the community because of their failure to act. And it infuriates me because we don't have to take that path if they would just listen. I have a question for you guys who just testified recently. How has the reception been from members of the DFL in terms of these bills and asking them to champion this legislation?
That's a great question. Jonathan, you want to take that one?
That is a great question. If I'm being totally honest, disappointing. It's disappointing, given the fact that a lot of these legislators ran on these very reforms, and it's almost you have a few members who have the ability to disconnect themselves from our plight, and it reminds me of what Congressman Dean Phillips said when it came to the January 6th, when the white supremacists were storming the Capitol, and he said that he said that he could just say that he was a Republican and that they would just leave him alone and it would give him long enough to get out and leave the place. But then he looked over and saw his black colleagues, and he realized that they can't do that. And it's almost like you have this in our Minnesota legislature, you have this very same disconnect with some of these chairs of these committees, where they feel they can disconnect themselves from the issues that we're trying to bring to help solve these problems that have been plaguing our communities for decades. And until we can wrap our hands around that, I mean, it's really a problem. It almost seems like they're more, they're in the pockets of the special interest groups who, and they want to cater to them while paying lip service to us, up until they're held accountable by their other members who because there are some good members on that side as well who are doing the work and are really fighting for us. But we have work to do on that side as well. It's not just the Republicans. It's also some Democrats who hold some of these beliefs that hurt our communities time and time again.
I think it's a lot of Democrats. I think that you guys are being really generous in what's happening. But even when Democrats have been in power at our legislature, they have not moved on any of these issues. I mean, we've been out in the streets for years, championing change, championing legislative change, and they have not budged. So for white women in particular who are watching this feed, one thing we need for you to do is to help hold Melissa Hortman accountable for using her influence and her leadership. You guys know how to write letters, should be writing her, emailing her, writing op-eds, calling her phone, making it uncomfortable for her until she steps up and leads on this issue. Period. Not just, supporting women of color when it's convenient for her and having, white women pat her on the back for that, which happened some years ago where she presented herself as an ally. And we're saying, if you're an ally, roll up your sleeves and actually do the work. You take on some of these folks inside the DFL who listen to you and challenge them to help champion these bills.
And I'll also add in there, it's not just Melissa Hortman. It's our governor. Our governor needs to step out, and he needs to step out and lead. He has to let the legislature know that criminal justice reform and police accountability is a priority of his, and he has not done that yet. He says he does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but not once has he held a press conference to address these issues or our claims or our concerns or our bills or our legislations. Again, we get paid lip service, and we get assigned a babysitter to babysit us. Where we have a phone number we can call, and our requests, our pleas fall on deaf ears, while we're still waiting to have him take a lead. And that's typically what you see in both the House and the Senate, is they put the blame on the governor and say the governor needs to tell us what to do because he hasn't set not one bill as a priority for police accountability, and he needs to come out and he needs to do that. This is real. This is politics, and if we're not going to let him get away with that either. So if he's watching, you know our number, and reach out to us.
I wanted to add to that. I think Nakima's point is very valid. We've all been, talking about this. This is the state where George Floyd was killed. The entire world is watching, and our legislators have not stepped forward together to say this is a moment for our state to lead on this issue. Instead, it's the activists and community groups who are demanding and begging for them to do what is absolutely right in a moment when the entire world is watching. I actually thought complete opposite. I thought they were going to grandstand on this and use this moment to say they're going to do all of these things. Instead, they're silent. The only thing we've heard from them is them rejecting the $35 million or talking about the $35 million. And then the next biggest thing I've heard about is the marijuana bill. I mean, I have not heard, other than John Thompson talking about his bill on the steps of the Capitol, which is the freshman Senate, House of Representatives, where is the leadership on this issue and why are they not vocal enough? And they right now control the House. They can do whatever they want, literally. Yes. But we have not seen the leadership. And I believe the reason why is because if the leadership actually took this matter seriously, we would have solved this issue long before George Floyd was killed.
Yes, and I just want to add to that is the 8 bills that we speak of, we drafted during the special session. We drafted over the summer. So they've had these bills over the summer, and we've been continuously trying to push these bills since this summer, and here we are still trying to push these bills, and they need to come out in front, and they need to lead. And I would hope that if none of these bills are part of the omnibus package that comes before the governor, that he shows his solidarity with the people by vetoing any legislative initiatives or omnibus that comes out of the state of Minnesota that does not include anything related to police accountability, transparency, or reform, especially since Minnesota is the state that killed George Floyd. The time is now, and you must take a side.
Somebody put a note in the chat part, which is great, and it talked about reaching out to your rural colleagues and your rural family and friends, because this is where a lot of that resistance comes from, is rural legislators. And so I think it's very important that we, make sure that we reach out to those rural folks, because that is rural legislators that are some of the people that are blocking this stuff. That's not to say it's perfect, because we've got it with urban legislators too. And I want to remind our viewers of one more thing. The cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul both have Democratic leadership. Pretty much 100% of the leadership in these two cities is Democratic. And we can't get those reforms, not necessarily state legislation, obviously, but our other recommendations and reforms, we haven't been able to get those across the finish line in those cities either. So, it's not like a Democrat-Republican thing. It's we don't want to give you anything, and we don't want to address our policing problem thing, in my opinion. So we are getting some good questions, from people about the timing of the omnibus bill and things like that. Jonathan, I'm wondering if you want to address some of that.
Okay. Right now, our next deadline is the 9th of April. The 9th of April is when the Senate is going to be putting together their omnibus package to present to the full body of the Senate. And so any hearing that we need to have needs to happen. If it's going to happen in a committee, it needs to happen by that date. The House of Representatives is also in the process of finalizing their omnibus package, and it's my understanding that the Public Safety and Judiciary Committees are going to combine their omnibus package, and Amy or the Becker Finn can give us our hearing in the Judiciary, so we can get some of our bills that are sitting on her desk to the omnibus package to be negotiated when the bills are reconciled. But we also have to do that on the Senate side too. So it's my hope that we can work through this, and that we take the measures necessary to push this legislation forward as far as we can. This is unprecedented times, and so business as usual is not. We shouldn't be looking at these bills as business as usual. We should look at it as what it is, and that's what the people want. It's the reforms needed to sit over here and fight this disease that has plagued our state.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're coming to the end of the program for today. We appreciate all of you for watching. We encourage all of you to share with your friends. If you've been watching with us, this is a good way for you to echo this. It will be stored right after we end the live session. Also, social media is very powerful tool. I just want to give one recommendation as kind of my closing remarks, and I'll allow everybody to say a few remarks to close off. Is that right now we need everyone really to reach out, especially the activists who are watching right now. Many of you have been boots on the ground. This is a moment really to reach out and grab some of the folks around us and to pull them in, because it's essentially important that they have a role in this process. And many of them right now are probably more engaged because of the trial, and we need to get them to focus on the solutions. Right, and so your local church group, if you're part of the union, if you're part of any affinity club, social justice group, Indivisible movement in the Twin Cities and rural Minnesota, every single one of you can have a role, and we have right in front of you some solutions that we need your help to push forward. But we also need you to hold rallies in your own towns, in your own communities, talking about these issues, presenting these issues as a solution. These can't just happen in Minneapolis. All of these issues are happening all over our communities, and get connected. So if you're an organization, we put the link on this right now. If you're an organization, you can do a sign on, and then you can learn about the next steps and next process so you can get involved. If you're an individual, you could always do the same thing as well. But also for folks, on social media, I keep repeating this, no more sympathies. Let's just focus on solutions. Let's not just grandize this issue and realize that we are called to action right now. We are called for change right now. We're not called to just talk and admire this problem. We're here to fix it and bring some solutions forward. And that's what we need. And we need everybody to do that. So, and I personally believe that God is on our side. So for many of you think we can get this right. The question is, can we put enough people on the ground? Can we get enough people moving? Online or offline, this is a moment right now for all of us to stand forward and to do the right thing, because it's important we do that. And I echo this a lot in the things, the messages that I say, is there's too many people that romanticize civil rights. You romanticize the idea that you would stand with Dr. King and you'd be one of those people and those black and white. No, if you're not standing right now, you would have never stood with those people. If you're not doing something right now, you would have not done anything. So check yourself. Are you a Facebook warrior that never really does anything? Or are you one of those people courageous enough not only to show up in protests, but really do the hard work offline and engage others? Many of you are the voice. You've heard so much. You're the most knowledgeable person on these issues. This is a moment to pull our friends and neighbors together and say, how as a group can we stand to get some things done? We don't protest aimlessly. We protest with some purpose. And that's what I call everybody to do.
Amen. Well said.
Thank you.
Anyone wants to go second or final remarks, and then we can close.
Folks, we're giving you an easy action to take. Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Yeah, and complacency shows. So, you know, history's going to remember those who were silent, and history's also going to remember those who will stand up. And the worst time to fall asleep is during a revolution. So the easiest thing you can do to participate is text that phone number right below, right here. You know, all you got to do is just text it, you know, come and join the fight. And if you're showing up, do a little bit more. I'll bring somebody with you next time.
Yes.
And people can go to mnjusticecoalition.org as well to learn more about the 8 bills that are currently pending at the legislature. And then I want to thank those who commented saying that they have called or emailed or that they will. We appreciate that. We also need people to step forward as organizers. Begin to organize your communities by letting them know about this and ask them to pledge to get involved.
And I'll end it by saying that don't think that we should wait for a better season or a better time. The time is now, and we have to do what we have to do. And as Jelani says, by any means necessary.
Zainab, you joined us a little late. Do you want to say any final words?
Yes, no, I think I'll just echo everything that you guys said, and that I think, like Jonathan said, this is the time to not only make change, but to hold legislators who ran on holding cops accountable, holding our justice system accountable. It's time to hold them accountable. It's time for them to step up and get behind the bills that they said they would support, even if they didn't on the policies that they said they were going to get behind. It's time we hold them accountable. They're going to knock on our doors, on their doors. And this is your time to text that number, fill it out, tell your organizations, your friends, your family, and make sure that they get behind it. Because there's not going to be a better time than today.
Tashira, you joined us a little late. Do you want to chime in? Can you hear us, Tashira?
I think Tashira might be frozen.
You frozen, Tashira?
It's technology, folks.
You got to get next to a heater to get unfrozen.
We do the best we can.
That smirk on Tashira's face is just how we feel when we have to go to the legislature and deal with these people.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Tashira and family supporting families, there is an activist right now that we should be paying attention to, Kaya Hurt, who chained herself to one of the fences outside the government center last night. And as far as Michelle knows, as of an hour ago, she's still chained there. And she's chained there calling for an overhaul of our system of policing in Minnesota, and also calling for the governor to meet with families who've been victimized by the police. Yes, we can hear you, Tashira. Now we can't hear you. You may want to turn your video off and just do audio so we can hear you.
You know, while we're waiting for Tashira, I just wanted to say thanks to Nakima for raising that about Kaya Hurt. She's a courageous young woman who's been a great activist for a long time. She's a school teacher, and she stepped up because she said this legislature's got to pass these bills. She had crafted this whole activism around writing the names of people that had been killed by police on locks and having them locked onto the fences around the government center. And every time, so there were 2 events, and every time during those 2 events, the National Guard would come out and clip all those locks off, as if it's so offensive to remember people who have, who have died at the hands of police, as if there's something terrible about, memorializing those people. And he just decided that this 3rd time last night, he didn't want to see people have their locks cut back down. He was done with that. So she decided that she would stay out there with those locks, and she would chain herself to the fence and dare them to cut her away. And they haven't. So that was a pretty brave move. And when she did it, she didn't just do that. She put up all kinds of signs about, here are the bills in the legislature. take action, stand with stolen lives. She's out there for a real reason, and she's courageous to do it. So
Yeah, we had that video playing there where you can see, I think, from this morning, where she was chained to the wall, to the wall.
Exactly. This is a real sacrifice, and she's making that sacrifice to tell people to step up, get us the legislation we need, pass the policies we need, and end the killing of innocent people at the hands of police. She's really out here, standing with the families of the 470 or so people that have been killed by police in the state of Minnesota since the year 2000, and that's amazing.
I know Tashira is trying to speak. She just messaged to see if we could hear her. Tashira, are you there? Okay, she's having some technical difficulties. Jaylani, when will we be back on live again to talk about our progress?
So we will let you know. We'll put up a Facebook event just like for today, but we'll be back soon. We want everyone to continue to share those particular bills and the action alerts, and also go to the website mncoalition.org. And so we encourage everybody to continue this fight. As the trial is going inside those courthouse, we got to continue to put the pressure inside the courthouse, but also outside the courthouse. And so I really appreciate all of you for joining us today. For all the activists on this call today, really appreciate all of you for stepping up and continuing this fight. And we will see you guys soon. Power to the people.
Power to the people.